Robert Sims may have just become the most dangerous man in Silo 18. And the craziest part is, he didn't do it by turning into a hero. He did it by finally realizing that loyalty to the Silo was never going to protect the people he actually loved. At the same time, Juliette's plan is no longer just a desperate gamble to stop the safeguard. It is now a live test of whether the algorithm can still predict every move before it happens. And once Lucas and Kennedy step outside into the dark, once Daniel and Helen finally get closer to the truth behind the project, once Camille starts choosing the system over her own marriage, the whole season shifts. This episode is not just another step forward. It is the moment almost every storyline starts tightening around the same pressure point. All right, welcome back to Breakdown Epic. Let's get into it. Quick spoiler warning before we get into it. Now, Silo Season 3, Episode 7 is one of those episodes where the plot gets bigger, but the emotional damage gets even more personal. On one side, Juliette is trying to save the Silo by risking a mission she knows could fail. On another, Robert and Camille are no longer just disagreeing behind closed doors. They are standing on opposite sides of what survival even means. And in the older timeline, Daniel and Helen are being pulled deeper into the kind of truth that doesn't just answer questions, it rewrites the meaning of everything around it. So let's start with the thing that mattered most to me in this episode, and that is Juliette finally moving from confusion into action.
Up until now, her arc this season has mostly been about recovering memory, recovering control, and trying to work out what was real and what had been chemically buried. But this episode changes that. She now has a plan. Not a clean one, not a safe one, but a real one. Sending Lucas and Patrick Kennedy out towards Silo 17 under the excuse of helping the children while secretly trying to trace the safeguard line is exactly the kind of morally complicated move this show thrives on. What I like about it is that Juliette now understands there is no harmless option left. If she does nothing, the memory suppression continues and eventually thousands suffer. If she blows the line, people die immediately. If she waits too long, the Great Reset hangs over everyone. This is no longer a mystery she gets to solve at a distance. It is a numbers problem with bodies attached to it. And in my opinion, that makes her more compelling than she has been all season. The Lucas and Kennedy outside sequence is also one of the best atmospheric scenes the show has done in a while. Seeing the outside at night through Silo-era eyes gives the whole world a different emotional weight. Patrick has spent so long romanticizing what lies beyond the walls that the reality of it hits him like grief. There is no paradise waiting, no easy freedom, just silence, corpses, dark land, and a sky so wide it almost feels cruel. But even in that disappointment, there is something strangely beautiful about the moment they look upward.
For a few seconds, the outside is not hope, and it is not horror. It is scale. And for characters raised inside a controlled vertical prison, scale itself is destabilizing. That is why I think the episode is doing more than just proving Kennedy wrong. It is showing us the truth in Silo is never clean. The outside is not the fantasy he believed in, but it is also not the simple lie the system sold either. It is complicated, and that complexity is exactly what makes it dangerous. Now, let's talk about the algorithm, because this episode gives us one of the most fascinating contradictions of the season. It tells Camille that Lucas and Kennedy will never make it, but by the end of the episode, they do, which means one of two things has to be true. Either the algorithm was wrong, which would be a massive crack in the myth of its absolute control, or it deliberately lied to Camille because her decisions mattered more than the mission itself. Personally, I lean toward the second option, and that is what makes this episode so sinister. The algorithm is not just managing events, it is managing belief. It tells people what outcome to expect so that it can shape how they behave before the truth arrives. That means Camille may be more manipulated than she realizes, which is saying something for a woman who just put memory drugs in the water before she was even told to. And that brings me to her, because wow, Camille has crossed into genuinely terrifying territory now. Earlier in the season, she still felt like someone trying to hold impossible pieces together. Wife, mother, IT head, believer in the Silo. Now, she feels like someone who has chosen the Silo over all of it.
The fact that she acted before the algorithm gave formal approval is the most revealing thing she has done. She is no longer simply following the system. She is internalizing it. She believes she knows what must be done, even if it costs other people their memories, their relationships, or eventually their lives. And that is exactly why her conflict with Robert now feels irreparable. This is no longer a marriage under pressure. This is a moral split. Robert looks at DeSilo and sees a machine that would happily erase his son's memory of him if it meant preserving order. Camille looks at the same machine and sees the only thing standing between everyone and total collapse. There is no compromise between those positions, not a real one, which is why her threat toward him hits so hard. Whatever you're hiding, when I find out, I'm going to have to do something about it. That is not wife language anymore. That is state language. And in my opinion, it is also foreshadowing. She is absolutely capable of sending him to clean if she thinks that is what the silo requires. In fact, I think the show is actively building toward that possibility. Robert spent years as the one carrying out ugly orders.
Now he may be the one standing in front of them. And what makes his arc so strong is that he did not change because he became noble. He changed because the system finally showed him what it really was. Every rejection, every closed door, every moment he was useful but never trusted pushed him toward this point. So now when he helps Juliette, protects Bernard, and arranges for relics to reach her, he is not doing it out of abstract heroism. He is doing it because the silo finally made the mistake of treating him as disposable. That is what breaks people in this world, not pain, clarity. Now let's shift over to Billings, because while his scenes are smaller here, I think they matter a lot. He is no longer a man wearing the pact with conviction. He is a sheriff going through the motions while everything around him keeps proving the rules are a joke. The thefts from Critical Supply, Orla's murder, his wife's ties to the outsiders, the way even people like Knox and Mark stopped treating his badge with real fear, all of that is pushing him toward a place where law without belief becomes impossible. The investigation around Glenda Harwood and the suspicious movement between Supply and Mechanical adds another layer too. I still think there is more going on beneath the official explanation, and Billings feels like the one character who could accidentally expose a whole second conspiracy while everyone else is busy with Juliette and the safeguard.
He is drifting toward the kind of position Meadows once occupied. Someone who knows enough to understand the system is rotten, but not enough to yet know how to fight it. And those characters are always dangerous, not because they are loud, because one day they stop playing along. Now let's go to Daniel and Helen, because their side of the story finally starts feeling like more than setup. The self-driving car taking them to Georgia, the reveal of the huge drill operation, the implication that they are being shown the future rather than just being threatened into silence. All of that tells me the before-time story is entering a new phase. They are not just witnesses anymore. They are being recruited, or judged for whether they can be recruited. Daniel especially feels vulnerable to that. He has the military background, the political exposure, the engineering relevance, and the emotional blind spot that comes from believing he can still reason with people who have already decided the world needs to be remade. Helen, on the other hand, is much harder to buy off, which is exactly why I think she is in more danger than Daniel is. If she cannot be turned, she will eventually have to be neutralized. And if Daniel keeps following her down that road, then he may finally have to choose between family, truth, and the project itself. Before I wrap up, here is the fast-fire version of what this episode really changed. Juliette is finally acting, not just remembering. Lucas and Kennedy reaching Silo 17 proves the algorithm is either fallible or manipulative.
Camille is no longer following the system. She is becoming it. Robert is now one of the most tragic and dangerous men in the silo. Billings is moving toward a point where his badge means less than his conscience. Daniel and Helen are no longer asking the edge of the conspiracy for answers. They are being invited inside it. And the biggest threat of all may not be the safeguard itself, but the people deciding when and why to use it. So, Overall, I think Episode 7 works because it turns every quiet tension this season has been building into something active. The lies are no longer stable, the alliances are no longer safe, and the machine that runs Silo 18 is no longer just reacting to rebellion, it is shaping who survives it. But anyway, that is my corrected breakdown of Silo Season 3, Episode 7, and why I think this episode quietly moves the show into full endgame territory. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments, do you think the algorithm lied to Camille? Or do you think Lucas and Kennedy surviving means the system is finally losing control for real? I will catch you in the next one.